Hello, everybody. This is Rob Fredette with the podcast HODGEPOG, and I have another special guest, Joe Zegarelli. We're going to be talking music today. I like to switch gears every now and then. I love music, but I'm going to learn about something different type of genre of music that I remember growing up, but I never listened to. I only knew of one artist, but we're going to be talking about electronic dance music and also how it stems from reggae and then how it influences all our music we listen to today. Joe Zegarelli, thank you very much for joining me. And I just found out talking, you're from the Boston area as well, so we got something in common.
Yes, sir. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And we're both Patriots fans, so we're going to let that everybody know up front. Well, first of all, how would you describe or define reggae music? I always think about Bob Marley, but there's more to it. And talk about that, and then we'll talk about other aspects. So define reggae music and just how it's intertwined what we listen to today.
Yeah, reggae music to me has sort of a heavy feel to it, especially in the drums. I like to say that it's definitely set apart by its syncopated melodies, the way that you'll kind of hear a kick drum and then the melody on the 2 note, and then you'll hear either another kick or a clap on the 3, followed by the melody again on the 4, which is something that gives it that sort of boom, 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 boom music that is it's just something funky. And it stemmed from Jamaica, which is, a very war-torn country, especially back when it started. So it has sort of this anti-establishment vibe to it. And it actually was, back in the day, it was considered ghetto music, especially in Jamaica. It was kind of on the outskirts until sort of Bob Marley came in and made it, what it is now.
Bob Marley, when I think of reggae, I think of Bob Marley, and you see commercials on television now that a lot of TV commercials like to have that nostalgic look or feel to it, and they play some Bob Marley songs. So he's still 50, 40 years later, he's still relevant in the minds of us here in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. He had a huge influence here and all around the world.
I was looking up, I don't know, but he died at a young age, did he not?
Yeah, he did. I actually can't remember the exact aspects of his death, but I do know that he was targeted multiple times by militia groups, and he was kind of trying to help out with his country and the divisiveness. And he tried to bring 2 candidates together that were on 2 completely opposite sides. And that really didn't sit well with a lot of the guerrilla groups there. So yeah, he actually left Jamaica at one point to go to England for a few years because he was so afraid for the attacks on his life.
He died in 1981, May 11th, at the age of 36 in Miami, Florida. The cause of death was melanoma. So his son, Ziggy Marley, also came out with some music afterwards. I believe that was in the 80s and 90s. Talk about other aspects to reggae music other than Bob Marley. He's the most famous one. I guess you would be Elvis Presley of reggae music. And that's a great way to parallel that. So talk about some other groups in reggae and then how it establishes like what we listen to today.
Yeah. So I'd say the main artist I want to talk about would be King Tubby. Jamaican music obviously had blues, ska, a lot of R&B, and, as time went on, it was reggae started making a big hit, especially like among the, true civilians. And then it sort of evolved. It happened right around the late 1960s. I believe it was 1968, where they'd been having these sort of parties that were called sound system parties. So since it was so expensive to go to concerts and people were incredibly poor, they started playing lots of R&B and reggae over these sound systems and charging low entry fees. And that was kind of the birth of the DJ, was the guy, picking the right tracks and putting them on there. And that slowly evolved into one day, one of these DJs kind of goes out and he he's listening to a track and the engineer forgot to put on the vocals. And he's like, I like this. I'm gonna take this to the sound system tonight. And he started out playing the vocal, and then he stopped and played the instrumental, and people loved it so much that there's multiple counts of people saying he had to play it over and over again for an hour. And from there, it just kind of like, there was Bunny Lee was there, who's a huge reggae producer. And he went over to King Tubby and was like, man, you're not going to believe what just happened. Like, this is crazy. We got to start trying to make some stuff like this. And so that's kind of how there's this new genre that's born of it called dub music. And it's become so popular in Jamaica. It was, people would print on the B side of a vinyl record, they would print like the dubs of the tracks. And there was a time in Jamaica, like in the 80s, where it was more popular. People are going to buy these records and they're just immediately putting on the B side and listening to the dub record. So that's kind of where, music, I think, kind of evolved and really changed and went from just, these bands to now there's audio engineers who are making tunes, and they kind of become the new artist in a sense.
Mm-hmm. When you think about the birth of rock and roll, I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. Elvis Presley, the birth of rock and roll is here in Memphis, but rock and roll had a huge influence on what we listen to today. Country music, of course, Nashville, the huge influence. But reggae, while getting ready for this, when I listened to some of the rock groups that I liked from the 70s and 80s, we'll get into hip hop later, but there's a lot of influence with some of the groups. For instance, did Bob Marley not write I Shot the Sheriff? Was that one of his original? That was an original from him, is it not?
It is an original from him. I'm not sure that he wrote it, but I believe it was someone in his group that wrote it.
Yeah, the reason why I bring that up is Eric Clapton covered that song. So
right.
Eric Clapton, it's pretty fascinating. Eric Clapton, of course, all-time great. And then when I look at the 80s, I had to listen to some of the 80s groups. I listened to the Police, the Talking Heads, and the Clash. Those are three bands from the 80s that I listened to. And there you can hear a little bit of reggae in some of the songs for like Talking Heads. And it's amazing just when you hear it, it's like it put two and two together for me. So talk about that, if you would, about the influence on like rock and roll and get into some other genres.
Yeah, absolutely. So reggae and rock and roll are honestly just long lost brothers when you listen to the two tracks or you listen to the two genres. I mean, even when Bob Marley was in England, they didn't know how to sell Bob Marley and the Wailers, so they just referred to them as a black rock group, and that was how they sold them. So there's definitely, and if I'm not wrong, the Clash too was a huge fans of dub music, and they used to go and listen to tons of tracks, especially like Lee Scratch Perry, who was prominent in the 80s and produced some Bob Marley tracks as well. He was also a dub artist in his own right. And yeah, I believe the Clash was huge fans of him and used to listen to his tracks for inspiration. And honestly, a lot of rock and roll artists did that as well. Yeah, there's definitely an influence that both had on each other, but definitely to me, like they are long lost brothers that are so similar, and people don't even notice until you start to listen to some of the tracks from the 80s and you're like, oh wow, these are, very similar, except for, reggae has a sort of, what's the right word? I want to say almost silly or goofy, like tone to it, whereas rock is, a lot more aggressive. Not to say that reggae isn't aggressive, but it's a little bit more funky than rock is, where rock is more sort of aggressive.
You mentioned the 80s, so I listened to some of the Talking Head songs today, and one of the songs from the Talking Heads, This Must Be the Place, sounds a lot like reggae. Just the track of that song, the pace of that song, the Clash, Rock the Casbah, sounds like a time of reggae. reggae beat to it as well. So when you listen to it, like you said, the Clash were huge fans. And then when you go to the 90s, you also have 311 as well, and Sublime. So when I listen to those groups about their songs, I see the connection there between the reggae and the, like you said, long lost brothers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Sublime does a great job of kind of going in between the two. They were so unique. They're one of my favorite bands just because, like, you know, they just went out and had fun. Like they didn't try to put themselves in a box. They were like, we love to make this sound. We love to make this sound. We'll put it in the same song. Like, we don't care. Yeah, it's definitely their influences. You can definitely tell the 80s rock and reggae when you listen to them.
Yeah, the Talking Heads, I was like blown away. I didn't think about that song, This Must Be the Place. And there's another song too that they sang. I'll come back to it later on in the episode. That the Talking Heads definitely had that. And the Police as well. The Police, late 70s and 80s. The one song that I can think of, every little thing she does is magic. That's got like a reggae beat to it. And I'm sure there's some other Police songs, but the Police, again, it's amazing when you look at their work. Reggae definitely played an influence as well.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I'm not totally familiar with all their tracks, but yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it is in the syncopated melodies and the way that they let sort of the kick drums come into play and, you know, really take over a lot of the tracks. With a big thing also in, you know, reggae and dub music is super sharp highs. So you really hear like that clap or, you know, the guitar, and in a lot of rock music can be a little bit sort of screechy, I guess would be a sort of way to describe it. And it's meant to be sharp, like it's meant to cut through. It's meant to have this pounding, aggressive bass and kick drum, and then also just something like really sharp cutting through the highs.
You know, you mentioned the difference. I guess you could say rock and roll's in your face, and then reggae is kind of like subdued, not subdued, but kind of relaxing. So like when you rock and roll, it's in your face. The guitar, the drums are all part of the rock and roll. Whereas I was listening to some reggae groups, Rebel Soldiers I've listened to before here, and it's amazing. All these groups, the songs are really catchy. And I was doing some research prior to our episode here, and studies have shown listening to reggae music can have a therapeutic effect, helping reduce stress and anxiety, boost mood, and even lower blood pressure. And I got that from the Reggae North website. So listen to reggae music, you'll feel a lot better. That's what I found that to be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely say firsthand that I think that's true. And that was kind of the intention of a lot of these dub artists, and them purposefully, you know, removing the vocals from tracks, was they wanted people to not have to identify with a certain lyric. They just wanted them to come dance and, you know, be able to let their minds do the thinking and work through some problems.
A few other groups that are tied to, and artists that are tied to reggae: Elvis Costello, the Rolling Stones, Rush, and the Mighty Mighty Bosstones. The impression that I get in 1997 was also considered kind of a reggae influenced hit as well, when you really think about it, with the horns. And I think when you listen, we talked about the Police earlier, there's some instruments in some of their songs. Doesn't have to be all reggae, but they seem to play instruments that are a little bit different. And I'll have to go back to listen to some of the Police songs, but they have like a little reggae instrument maybe. I'm not familiar with the instruments, but it has that sound to it.
Yeah, sort of like a shaker, or some of their drums just have a very unique sound that's similar to drums we would use, but they have just this little tonal difference that's really unique.
I just think of drums are just banging the hell out of them and just going off. I don't think of like subtle. I could not be a drum player in a band. Like when the drummers for some of these bands and they tap it and they just have that discipline, just want to bang the hell out of it and just make a hell of a lot of noise. It's just me, but
yeah, I'm right there with you.
I love bang when some of these guys bang the drums. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So talk about like the difference, like the influence that reggae had on pop and also hip hop, because while getting ready for this, quite a few hip hop artists have also been influenced by reggae. So talk about that, like the pop and the hip hop, because you're still hearing that today.
Yeah, definitely. I think without reggae and without dub music, there is no hip hop. So, like I was talking about with these sound system parties and them transitioning to pretty much just playing dub, they started to have guys come over and do what was called toasting. So the DJ who was responsible for playing the tracks, it was typically them, but sometimes they also had specific guys who were there to just toast, and they would just talk over the track. And originally it was really just like a whimsical proverb or some sort of joke, just something to kind of just keep the flow of the evening going. And then that kind of got all changed by this guy, Roy, who would just continuously toast. He would, throughout the whole night, there would be a theme, and he would keep reinforcing it with different quotes, different proverbs, different things of the sort. And so that kind of became huge all through. It was just all these guys toasting on the tracks. And one of the guys, Cool Herc, he's one of the three people, I believe it's him, Grandmaster Flash, and somebody else who were kind of credited with starting hip hop in New York. And, like we were talking about Jamaica being sort of a war-torn country, a lot of people who left went to New York, and they tried to keep their culture alive. And Cool Herc actually grew up in Jamaica too. So he was very familiar with sound system culture, had, been to a bunch of them growing up. That was what he was used to. And so I believe it was in Brooklyn in the 80s, they started, being on the side of the road with just some DJ just playing tracks, and then they're toasting over it, or what we refer to as emceeing. And it just really took off. We started to see MCs separate from the DJ. The DJ starts to go back into the background, is really just playing tracks. And that's sort of the birth of hip hop right there. And then talking about these reggae influenced artists, another one I would say is Biggie Smalls. He was of Jamaican descent himself, and he actually spent some childhood time vacationing in Jamaica and seeing the sound system culture, seeing these DJs. And that's where I think he really gets his flow from, that style of just sort of speaking and telling your story, but it kind of all comes back to it's rhyming, and it's just amazing.
You mentioned Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. I remember them from the early 80s. So some of the songs that they had which were really The Message. I remember that song coming out, White Lines. And when you think about it, there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of dub, a lot of reggae feel to it. And that's pretty fascinating that you mentioned that, because those songs were like top notch, like listened to all time. I mean, that was just back in the early 80s. That was must listen to radio.
Yeah. And a lot of these guys, just like in Jamaica, they didn't have this crazy equipment. They just knew what they liked. They knew what sounded good, and they went out and made it with what they had. And that's, I think characteristic of a lot of early hip hop is, you can hear it wasn't made on the best equipment, whether that's because of the time or because of circumstance. It's just, I think it's a really neat thing that, with a lot of people nowadays thinking, I need to have this to be, a great musician or whatever, field you're in. And these guys kind of prove, like, as long as you've got a passion and, you can make something good, like, you can do it with anything.
So let's talk about you. How long are you involved in the music industry, or are you just really a connoisseur of music?
I'm involved in the music industry as well. I'm a DJ and producer. I have my own event DJing company, Classy Rhythms, LLC, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Find us at classyrhythms.com. And then I produce music as well. I have my electronic project, Fun Guy, just as Fun Guy, but with a V instead of a U. And yeah, I think it's still the type of music that I like to make for my electronic project. I think ties in a lot to the old school culture, in a lot of different ways that I'd love to get into a little bit further into the episode.
So can you make music using samples and things of that nature? Have you been able to do that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I've made a good handful of songs, a couple that I'm going to be releasing soon. And typically I love to do my own sound design. I like to make my own, I guess sounds is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I could put together a full track, and honestly, the genre I make is very Jamaican influenced. The only real other genres that I've heard have this drum pattern are some reggae subgenres, and then sometimes country, and that's really all I can think of.
So what type of influence did they have? Because getting ready for this, I saw that like Notorious B.I.G. had a huge influence from reggae. What other hip hop bands like from the 90s had their influence, some from reggae?
Yeah. Specifically off the top of my head, I can't really think of too many, but a lot of guys, at that time have at least some sort of loose affiliation with Jamaica, whether their parents were immigrants. But to me, I think the real influence is just in the culture and in the music itself, just the way that it came from DJs to toasters to MCs. And then also in the culture itself with or in the music itself with trying to have sort of a focus in the bass with the drums. And, like the 808 became a big thing. And a huge thing about the 808 is that it has a lot of like subwoofer frequencies that last for a while. So you hear that boom, boom, boom. That's something that definitely is inherently reggae and Jamaican.
A Busta Rhymes and Heavy D and the Boys just looked. So those have some influence from reggae as well, from Bob Marley and the other artists. So talk more about your business. How often do you perform, or how often do you go out and do events?
Yeah, it's hot and cold, just like any other sort of gig job. So a lot of months I'm playing for 4 shows in a month. I'll do like 2 at a bar, 2 events. And then other months it's like I'm just playing once. Yeah. And I'm trying to get more out now into the bar scene, just because there's a little bit more of the residency aspect where there's constantly something going on there. So it's a little bit less free in what you can play, and you got to kind of be a lot more prepared for a diverse crowd, or in some cases a super unique crowd. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm aiming my focus now, is residencies and weddings.
That's good. Well, that keeps you busy, especially like weddings in the summertime. So you said you live in Charlotte. So I've been to Charlotte a few times. I worked at the racetrack Motor Speedway about 8 or 9 years ago for the Coca-Cola 600. So talk about Charlotte. Charlotte's a really nice town, and they call the downtown uptown. Is that not correct?
That's correct. If someone says downtown, you're just like, you mean uptown?
I didn't understand that when I went there. It said uptown. I said, why don't they just call it downtown? Charlotte's a really nice city.
Yeah, it's great. It's awesome. I was listening to a comedian the other day, and he was talking about Charlotte, and he's like, Charlotte's so awesome, but I always forget about it when I'm not there. And he's like, when I'm leaving, I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever be back, but if I ever do, it's fine. And that's like kind of how I feel about Charlotte. It's great, and there's a lot of great things going on, but there's nothing really that makes it stand out too much outside of the finance sector. Like, Nashville has country music, or Vegas has the nightlife, or New York's, the city that never sleeps and has got some melting pot. So yeah, Charlotte's great, and it's growing a lot every single day.
Yeah, I went to go work the Coca-Cola 600 back in 2016. Went to Uptown to go eat a couple of nights. Worked the racetrack, and it was kind of crazy. It was like 20-hour days for like 10 days straight. I was looking forward to coming home to Memphis after that. But yeah, Charlotte is a cool city. Do you ever catch any Charlotte basketball games, the Hornets?
Yeah, I do. I go twice a year when the Celtics are in town.
All right. Hey,
yeah.
what do you think
World
about the
champions,
Celtics winning
baby.
this year? What do you think about the Celtics winning?
That was amazing. I've been waiting so long to see that. I mean, it's felt like it's been a while since Boston won a championship in general, even though it really hasn't. But yeah, I've been waiting on the Celtics to do it for quite a while to see them get to, the Eastern Conference finals, the finals, and just, 6 years straight of just like that. And to finally get over that hump and do it with a team that is going to be together for a while is just really great.
Well, I'm a few years older than you, and I can tell you, growing up in the early 80s when the Celtics won, I still remember the 81, 84, 86 wins. I remember the 85, 87 losses to the Lakers, which is still hard to believe. And it was great. It's 30, was it 1986? So you're talking 38 years. The Celtics have won 2 in the last 38 years, 2008 and now here. So it was a 38-year spread where they get 2. And early 80s, it was 3, 81, 84, 86. And the Celtics-Lakers series in the early 80s and the 76er Celtics series were unbelievable. There was no internet. There was no social media. The whole city of Boston it'd be a ghost town because every town was a ghost town because everybody was watching those games. And I was kind of glad that they won this year because, they've been through a lot, and I was very proud of them when they won. And I knew they were going to win when Peyton Pritchard hit that half-court shot. That was sweet.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, I knew right then and there that was, a moment that would live on in Boston's memory forever. Just the whole garden shaking, everyone's jumping up and down. That was amazing.
It was really cool too. I always like it when they win the championship, and that week after, all they do is celebrate. They have the parade. And then they walk around with the world championship trophy. They have their part where they can walk around with it. And Joe Mazzulla walking through the North End with the trophy, or Hanover Street in Boston. It's just good that you get to let loose. But the new season starts, and I can't wait. And it was truly awesome to see him win. And it was funny, before the series started, people didn't think the Celtics were going to win. And I remember before the clinching game, I remember game warm-up, they're showing Luka and Kyrie, and they're not even showing the Celtics. They're up 3-1. I said, what am I missing here?
Yeah, I mean, that was so hard to understand because, they tore through the Eastern Conference, and you can say injuries or whatever, but, we had Kristaps injured too. It's not like we were just, super healthy. We're missing one of our top guys. And to think that those 2 players were going to beat our whole team was just insane to me. And then game 4, the way the reporters were talking too, it was just like there's a clear bias against us, which, I'm fine with. How it is being a Bostonian. Keep doubting us.
Of course.
But I definitely felt like we deserved a lot more respect. That was.
I agree.
That was rough to hear.
That Kyrie and Luka are great players, but I just said, we're up 3-1. Why do they keep showing these 2 guys? I don't know. I may be in the minority, but the guys were up 3 games. They were in the driver's seat, but that was totally cool watching that when they won. I had to stay up till like 12 o'clock, 12:30. I'm an early bed person, so it was good. So Sorry we got off on that tangent there. We had to talk a little Boston stuff. Let's talk about reggae music. So what are some other bands of reggae or, in the history of reggae other than Bob Marley that really stand out to you?
My favorite reggae band is Ayaterra, who sadly just disbanded or their lead singer just left in January. But they'd been together for 10 years. And to me, they just, everything that they talk about can be so simple yet so profound. Like they have one song where they talk about, many rhythms, one sound, and they're describing their music, but they're also talking about, unity within society and how we can all be individuals that all, sort of come together to, create one beautiful harmonic sound. They're by far my favorite. Some other great artists, Max Romeo. We already talked about Lee Scratch Perry a little bit. Mad Professor, Alpha and Omega. Yes, there's another and one that I can't remember right now. And then obviously, I'm sure a lot of people will know Stick Figure. They're a big band in reggae that's been around for a while and is still doing their thing. Trying to think who else would be good for that people may know or to look into, but those are definitely a lot of my top guys right there.
That's awesome because I'm going to start listening to reggae a little bit more after this episode here because I was listening before we got on. I was like, pretty neat. I mean, just the influence it had at rock and roll. What are some of your favorite rock and roll bands and with all the genres? What are some of your favorite rock and roll bands?
I would probably have to say Nirvana, obviously. And then honestly, I there's a lot of bands that I just like a few of their songs and think they're really great. Obviously the Police, they've got some great tunes. There's a lot of bands today, or at least from the past 20 years that I've really liked, especially in the pop punk category. So Blink 182. Paramore. And actually what's really cool is for pop punk, they use a certain drum pattern that developed in the United Kingdom from dub music. They took dub music, sped it up, put in these faster drums, and that kind of formed the genre of jungle. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it. It's huge in the UK though, and prominent in a lot of our music with that super fast drumming. And so that's where I kind of like a lot of my pop punk is that drum, and then also it just changes the whole atmosphere of the song. So yeah, I'd say that's probably where my rock and roll lies off the top of my head. Sure, I can think of a few more.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I think with the drums, when you listen to drummers in the rock and roll, Alex Van Halen or Phil Collins, other drummers that I can't name off the top of my head, I always like the rhythm because I think the drums are the instrument that actually provides the rhythm. Is that not right?
That is right. There's pretty much any instrument can have its own rhythm because, when you break music down, the two real factors are rhythm and melody, but every melody has a rhythm because it has to be, am I going do, 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 do? And, you can play your notes on it to have it have a certain melody, but that's still a rhythm that you're doing. So yeah, to me, drums are where you really get a lot of that rhythm from, and sort of how the music communicates to you how to dance in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a good rhythm. Like certain songs I'll listen to from rock and roll bands. I always know that little drum. It's amazing. I think drummers are so disciplined. I just want to bang the hell out of it, like I said earlier, but how they remember each part of that drum kit is amazing how they do that. It's amazing.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get a pair of electric drums and really learn how to do it because I can mess around on my computer all day and make different drum patterns and, put little accents on it. But the way that drummers just have this sort of connection with their drum kit and can just create different things, that's, I think that's something that you can't really translate to a laptop or just finger drumming with buttons. Yeah, I think there's something really unique about an actual live drummer.
And also, you mentioned Nirvana earlier. I don't know, are you familiar with the unplugged albums of
Yes.
MTV? Well, in my personal opinion, the Nirvana unplugged album is the best unplugged of all time.
I can see that. I'm not too familiar with all of the unplugged, so
I'm not either.
I'd have to give them a listen.
The Nirvana unplugged is I've had some guests on. We've talked about music in previous episodes. I think that is the greatest unplugged. And my favorite song is out of that, Lake of Fire. And they have the Meat Puppets out there with them playing on it, and just the camera angles, just the synergy between both bands. I mean, every time I watch it, I go, wow, just the way they were fading the video in and out in that 3-minute song just blows me away. I'm going to have to watch it tonight after we get off.
I mean,
pretty
certain
cool
bands like that, like just, Nirvana is one of those bands where their music was great, but you hear about their live shows and you just know that seeing them live is a whole different experience than just listening to their music in the car.
Yeah, and yeah, because prior to the unplugged, they came out with "Smells Like Teen Spirit,"
Right.
that album there. And when you watch unplugged, I mean, he's just sitting on a stool singing, drinking a cup of water, and then that song, Dave Grohl, he was just tapping those drums like this, and he was just very disciplined. And it's really amazing. But if you have a chance, watch Lake of Fire. Unbelievable song. So I always talk about that when I talk to people about music. So
yeah, I'm going to have to put that one on again a little bit later tonight.
It's pretty good. I've seen Eric Clapton unplugged was awesome. Rod Stewart, awesome. Kiss had an unplugged as well. So those are the big four that I remember. I know I'm missing a whole bunch of others, but those are the four that I remember from the 90s. So talk about your business again. You're in Charlotte. So talk about your plug your business and your DJing and what you do, and then we can talk some more.
Yeah, so I do open format DJing in Charlotte, North Carolina. My business is Classy Rhythms. You can find us at classyrhythms.com or on social media at Classy Rhythms LLC. And it's a lot of fun doing those events or playing for a local bar business, just because the open format it's interesting because you have a certain set of songs that you can play, right? Like there's some out there songs that I love, and it just doesn't really translate as well because people want to hear music that they're familiar with. So it can be a lot of fun to prepare for by being like, where am I playing? And, have I been there? What is it like? Do I know anybody else that's played there? One of my favorite events that I did was Cinco de Mayo event here at Salsas in Airsley, and shout out Salsas in Airsley. They're amazing. The owners are great. The food's great. And I really love that one because I love to discover new music. So I listened to some Latin music. I had some Latin tracks, but I hadn't really done like a full Cinco de Mayo event. And it was interesting talking to the owners because they're like, well, most of our customers are American. They're not Hispanic at all, but they like love to hear Hispanic music. And I'm like, okay, so how do I kind of structure this? And my big idea was I was going to play like 60 to 75% Latin tracks. And I was going to dig really deep for any track that's in Latin and I've heard before, like Livin' La Vida Loca.
Yeah.
There's a few by Enrique Iglesias. There's some reggaeton songs that, have gotten big here. And so I was like, I'm going to find all those, but then I'm also going to find some of the like sing-along tracks that the kids in their 20s know, but also, their aunts and uncles know. So I found a bunch of those. I found a lot of the like early 2000s sort of mix of those tracks. And then I obviously had to find a lot of the today's reggaeton and sort of like Spanish house. And yeah, that was just a really fun one because it was great to play all this Latin music for people as well as a mix of family friendly hip hop and, some family friendly pop. So I think that that's what I really love about this business and what I can do for anyone looking to hire a DJ is just go out there and find a way to research your audience and make sure that I get the best tracks, plan out the best night, take care of my what ifs, which is a great DJ set technique that I learned when you're sort of worried about how an event is going to go. Write down your what ifs, like, and then you find out you're like, well, what if it turns into this? What if it turns into that? What if they say it's that, but it's really this? And then you can learn to be like, well, let me get some songs for in case that situation does occur. So, that's something that I really like to provide to people and provide, a great experience for all of their guests. Cause that's really what it's about at the end of the day. No one's going to be going back and thinking, oh, did you hear the way he mixed this song into that song? It was so technically correct. No one's thinking about that. Everyone's just remembering the time they were having with their friends dancing. And that's what I try to provide to people when they hire me.
And you just mentioned music. We talked about sports earlier with the Celtics. Those are the two connections that where people don't care about anything. They just go to have a good time. And like if you have people dancing, they're having a great time. So
right,
that goes with saying. So real quick, what's the one or two things that you really like about Boston? And I'll tell you mine, because what are a couple of things that you love about Boston and what you miss about Boston?
What I love about Boston, which is also something that I would say I don't really like about Boston, but it's the people. Like the people are just, they're a whole different breed. And, I hear from a lot of people that go and visit there. They're like, people there are crazy. I can't believe you grew up there. And I'm like, I mean, once you get to know how to deal with them, like they're pretty good people. They just like to yell at you a lot. And it's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah, people
yeah, they're unique. I definitely inherit a little bit of that, but yeah, I think that's definitely something I love about it. And then also just, man, there's so much that you can do there, and there's much advancement. I mean, like, I would say something I miss is kind of like the Museum of Science. Like, it's a weird one, but like, there's just, like the Omni Theater, like they put up this sphere, and I was like, I've seen this before. It's we take it for granted when we live there, like how advanced Boston really is, and we never really think about it. But just being able to go in there, and we have science museums in Charlotte, but they're definitely, the one in Boston is just on a whole other level. So, and then of course, definitely miss my food, my grandmother's food. She's from Italy, and she makes the best pasta and sauce. Can't get it anywhere else. And then I'm in just the other Italian food, and just the unique cultures that we have in Boston. Like there's, Charlotte's kind of a melting pot too, but I always say, like, in Boston, like you get like Cape Verdeans and like people from like St. Thomas, like and it's not like there's like just a couple people from there. Like there's whole subsets of groups and like little towns that certain cultures have just like taken over, and that's just there's so much unique things that you can explore in Boston that you don't really get too much of in the South.
Yeah, I grew up in just north of Boston, North Andover, and it's a small town. Back when I've been gone now since 1995, but I've gone back probably about a half a dozen times since then, and took my wife up there a few years ago. And it's amazing all the places I didn't go to when I was there, and I felt like a tourist when I was there. And I places like, where did we go? We went to the John Hancock. We went to the Prudential Building. We went to Years. The State House, things I never did, you know, Boston Common we did. Faneuil Hall was a main place where we went because we used to go there and eat before Bruins and Celtics games and then just walk over to the old garden. So I miss those things. The North End, yes, is great. We ate at the North End there. I love the North End. And just the pace and just the I miss like the people, like you said earlier. It was just it's just I remember when we were at the airport, we were getting on the T to go to get our car, and there was a guy standing there. This was about 12 years ago, and people are getting on the train, and like he started yelling like the people to get on the train to pack him in. I'm like, whoa! It was like a culture shock for my wife to see that, and he's yelling. And I thought that was fun. That I'm back home. I'm back home. So the traffic, just everything there, like going down. Just on a sunny Saturday afternoon to Boston Common, just to walk, take the tea, experience the tea is just totally, I miss it when I go back. I love every second of it. I soak it all in. So absolutely awesome.
The Commons especially is so beautiful. Love it there.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. I remember in 85, they used to have a thing, or in the mid 80s, they used to have concerts on the Common, and it was a wooden wall around the Boston Common. I remember they used to have concerts like big name acts. I saw Don Henley there of the Eagles. He was going solo at the time in 85. And I remember going to the concert, and I remember there was apartment buildings right next door, and the fire engines were going. They had a fire, and it was like you heard the fire engines, the concert going on at the same time. It was like really wild. It was like, whoa. So,
yeah.
Like that's the part of a big city. And
things like that just happen in Boston, you know. It's just, they even had that in my time. They had Mac Miller came and played at, where'd he play? I think he played at like the front steps of the State House, like a free concert, and it was just like a crazy day. But you know, that's just Boston for you. Things like that just happen.
They do. I miss it. I'd like to get up there probably in the next year or two or so, but I really miss it up there. So Joe Zegarelli has been my guest. We've been talking about his music business as a DJ, about reggae, the influence it had on different genres that we still hear today. And Joe, I really appreciate you coming on. I really enjoy talking music with you, and I'll have to get you back on again. We can talk about your business again and more about music. We could have covered probably a lot more, but I'll have to get you back on. So thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. I'd love to be back, and thank you for having me.
No worries. Well, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate you coming on.